Something Real Chapter 8. The group arrived at the office in Wichita, Kansas. Abby quickly climbed out and took the dog for a walk. She pulled a pack of cigarettes out of her pocket, one she had bought at the store in Coffeyville, and lit one. The marshals lingered outside while she walked the dog. She let her thoughts wander, trying to determine how she could be so fooled by Carter, wondering how she didn't see it. She turned to see Crow trotting up to her. She turned away from him and rolled her eyes. She didn't want to make the rounds with him. Not right now. "Can I get one of those cigs from you?" Crow asked as he came to a stop. She tossed him the pack, which he caught, and pulled one out. He dug his lighter out and began to puff on the cigarette. He handed her back the cigarettes and wondered how she did it on her own. He watched her as she held the dog's leash. "Are you all right?" He looked at her intently. He knew she wasn't. She was heavily emotionally involved with Carter. She didn't look at him, but she took a drag on her cigarette and shook her head. He could see her start crying. She soon finished, and they all went in. Crow brought her to an interview room. He leaned over and slipped a handcuff on her wrist and then put the other around the chair. "What the hell?" She looked at him with a sense of deceit. "You're not walking off again." Crow gave her a knowing grin. "And you know I can do it. You're a material witness. This is bullshit, and you know it." She looked at him disgusted. "It is what it is." He left her for a moment while he got his men started on making arrangements for her. She sat continuing her thoughts, pissed they would leave her in an interview room like a damn suspect. She looked at the dog sleeping at her feet and wondered where they were going to end up. The door soon opened, and she looked up to see Carter walking in. She shook her head. "I don't want to talk to you. You don't have to talk. You just have to listen." Carter closed the door and sat down at the table across from her. "I know you can't stand me right now, but you need to understand why I did what I did. I'm no guiltier than you are a deception. I was just trying to stay alive," she growled at him, tears streaming down her face. "And I was trying to keep you that way. Everything I told you, aside from my job, was true. I do love you. I will always love you. I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you as safe as possible. It's my fault that I let us get that close. I should have stopped it, but I didn't, and we did, and it was all real. I wish we could have met under other circumstances, but we didn't, and now we have to deal with it. I called them in because we can't do it alone. We need help, and they're the best." He watched as she wiped the tears off of her face. "I've been reassigned to Crow's unit temporarily, just until you're done with the trial, so we're going to have to deal with it one way or another." Carter thought for a minute. "Abby, I wouldn't change a thing that happened between us, not one thing." He watched as she cried and dropped her head to the table. She sat up and looked at him. "I love you, I do, but it just hurts so much." She turned and wiped her eyes on her sleeve. "I know, and the last thing I want to do is hurt you." Carter looked at her, and it tore him apart that he had done this to her. "But we can make it through this." She nodded, but she couldn't speak anymore. Crow walked in almost as if it had been timed where he had been watching. Abby suspected he was on the other side of the mirror for all, or at least some, of the conversation. He placed a bottle of soda on the table and stepped back out to the office area to grab a box of tissue. He left the tissue on the table and closed the door. "We're making the arrangements, but it's going to be a few hours before we can do anything. My men are going home a few at a time to pack bags and make arrangements with their housing. As soon as they all finish, we're going to leave. This will probably take about 4 hours." Crow looked at Abby. "I still don't trust you. I'll take you across to a break room. It has a couch. You can lay down if you want, but I'm handcuffing you to something in there. I need something to eat, and I'd like a smoke." Abby looked over at him. "You can smoke in the break room. There's ashtrays in there." Crow looked over at her. "A couple of the guys are out right now. I'll get one of them to get some burgers. Just hang tight in here until after you eat." He pulled a drawer open on the table where Carter was sitting and pulled out an ashtray. "Until then, bathroom." Crow looked at her, knowing she was being difficult. "I got it." Carter held up his hand. He pulled his keys out, unlocked the cuff on the chair, and put it on her other wrist. "Really?" Carter shrugged. "He makes the rules." He motioned to Crow. She went to the bathroom and was brought back to the interview room. She pulled out her cigarettes and lit one. Carter joined her again and grabbed the cigarettes. He lit one and sat at the table. "Y'all owe me a pack." Abby looked up at Carter. She thought as they sat, "Where are we going?" "You know how it works?" He looked over at her. Knowing she was just trying conversation, "You don't find out until we get there. I just want something real." Abby sighed out. I just want to live my life. Carter took a long drag on his cigarette. You know that's impossible right now. I know, it's just taking forever. She tapped the ashes off in the ashtray. The food arrived, and they all ate their fill. Winchester even snuck in a few fries. Carter took the dog for a walk while Abby waited in the interview room. Carter returned to escort Abby to the break room where she could rest. She went a step out into the office area and immediately ducked back in. Close the door. Abby was panicked. Carter knew it. He quickly closed the door. What is it? The man sitting on the desk, the one in the suit, that's the man that was waiting at the secondary location. Abby was having trouble calming herself. Carter opened the door and looked over to see FBI agent Rob Hall sitting on the desk. Crow, can you come see? Crow finished his conversation and then joined the two in the interview room. That's him. That's the man who was at the secondary location. Abby motioned toward the office area, the one sitting on the edge of the desk in the suit. Crow tensed and closed the door to the interview room. Abby, do you know what you're saying? That's an FBI agent. I'm telling you that's the man. Abby insisted. She was now terrified. He tried to kill me once. What's to stop him from trying again? Keep her in here. I'm going to go call the bureau. We're going to have to reassign her location. We have to assume it was compromised. Crow couldn't believe what was happening. I'll get my men started on it as quickly and quietly as possible. He then left to get it all straightened out. Carter, Abby was about to lose it, and he could tell. Look, I'm here. I won't let him try anything. Carter tried to reassure her. Crow was on the phone with the FBI office, and they guaranteed him he would have 4 agents there within minutes to escort Hall back to the local bureau office. Crow quietly talked to each of his men and explained what was happening. They all again began to quietly get a new location. Crow stepped over to the interview room. Abby, why don't you come to my office? You can sit in there. I would suggest you don't even look at the agent. Just walk to my office and sit down. Can you please take these handcuffs off? No, I can't. Crow motioned for them to walk over to his office. They stepped out of the interview room just as the other agents were arriving to escort Hall away. He knew what was going on and quickly pulled his gun and fired in Abby's direction. The agents and marshals quickly had him subdued on the floor and disarmed, but not before one bullet found its mark. Abby, Crow looked down in shock as he saw blood oozing from her shoulder. Crow, Carter, and a couple of other marshals dove to the floor and began working to stop the bleeding. Call for an ambulance. Carter called out. Deputy Marshal Jason Beggs took charge since he was a paramedic. Hall was quickly dragged from the scene by fellow agents. One of the marshals was on the phone. The men grabbed what they could to put pressure on the wound. Crow quickly removed her handcuffs. She plainly couldn't go anywhere in her condition. Within minutes, the paramedics were running in. They began to work on her, trying desperately to get her stable. I need a phone, one of the paramedics announced, and one was placed on the floor by Abby's head. He picked it up and dialed as FBI agents began to flood the office. What's her blood type? One of Crow's men picked up her file, B positive. I need a landing site and somewhere to take her. The paramedic looked around for someone in charge. The parking lot, and we're getting clearance now from McConnell. Crow looked up at his man on the phone. Harrington looked over at Crow and gave a thumbs up. You got your clearance from McConnell. The paramedic relayed all the information to the person on the phone. The Huey should be landing any second, he announced, and they could all hear the rotor wash outside. Abby looked at the two paramedics. I don't want to die. We're here to make sure that doesn't happen. The paramedic told her as she slipped the oxygen mask onto her. They got her loaded up onto the stretcher and were wheeling her out. Is anyone riding with us? The paramedic turned to the group. I am, Carter announced, and followed the group out of the building. We'll meet you there, Crow called after Carter. They arrived, and Abby was rushed into surgery. Carter was terrified by the lack of optimism in the doctor. Abby had lost a considerable amount of blood, so it would be touch and go. Crow arrived, and he was appraised of the situation. Hall is on his way to D.C. as we speak. Crow informed him. Carter nodded. They don't want Antonoff to find out her location. How in the hell is this happening? Crow sat down in the surgical waiting room. I should have known when she took off some shit went down. That just wasn't her. Crow shook his head, but she could have called me. No, she couldn't think about it. She had no idea who it was that turned on her. Carter tried to explain. It could have been anyone, and when she saw Hall at the secondary location, she didn't know him, so obviously she had no idea he was a Fed. Crow nodded in understanding. The time dragged on as the men paced, waiting for news. The doctor did eventually come out, and the news was much brighter. Her bleeding was stopped, and the affected area was cleaned and repaired as best they could. She would be on some strong antibiotics for quite a while, and the wound would have to be cleaned daily by some sort of medical professional. She would be in recovery for another hour, and then ICU until they felt more comfortable with her progress. Her chances of recovery were great, and he could almost guarantee full use of her left arm upon recovery. "Did you get straight with her?" Crow asked Carter as they stepped outside to get some air and a smoke. Carter handed him the pack of cigarettes, and they both lit one up. "I think so." Carter looked out over the parking lot from the rooftop smoking spot. "I have a feeling you won't know for a while, but man, what were you thinking?" Carter shook his head. "I really do love her." This surprised Crow. "She's cool as shit, but you really fell for her?" "Yes, I'm crazy about her." Carter turned back to the parking lot. "Then what the hell are you thinking?" Crow looked over at Carter, wondering if he was thinking ahead on this one. "What do you mean? She's going to have to cut all ties." Crow couldn't believe he had to spell it out for him. "That's going to include you." This information looked like it hit Carter like a ton of bricks. "I didn't think about that." Carter began to consider this and turned to Crow. "Don't tell her. She's eventually going to find out. She has to." Crow didn't understand the point. Carter sighed and looked at Crow. "She told me when we were together it was like she had a normal life." Crow tossed his head, realizing the point Carter was getting at. "I'm not saying I have nothing invested, but she deserves even the littlest bit of something real," Carter explained. Crow nodded. "She does, but is that really fair to her? She's going to go through all those months not really thinking about it. I'm not saying she doesn't know. She does, but she might think that's an exception. I'll explain it to her," Carter offered, "but I'm going to give her time to recover." Crow nodded and looked over at Carter. "I have no argument against that." The men returned to her watch, and the rest of Crow's team soon joined them. She was released from ICU, but would be in the hospital for at least a few days. She was put in a room at the end of a hallway, and the marshals were stationed outside her doorway. Crow's orders were to allow only the team access and only approved doctors and nurses. Everyone else had to have approved entry. Crow and Carter sat in her room as she slept. They needed to question her about where she had been since she left Kearney, but it would probably wait until she was back in hiding and somewhat recovered. The doctors came in frequently to check on her and explained she would need extensive physical therapy. Crow assured him it wouldn't be a problem. One of his men received a degree in physical therapy. "Why don't you get cleaned up? I brought the bag of clothes up here, and there's a bathroom right there." Crow told Carter, who hadn't left her side since she had been in the room. "I'll wait till she wakes up." Carter adjusted himself in the chair next to her bed. "No," they heard Abby say sleepily. "You need to go clean up." The men chuckled and moved closer to her bed. "How you feeling?" Crow asked her with a grin. "Like $1,000,000, she said sarcastically. "Why do I keep getting shot at? And when are y'all finally going to get me some Kevlar?" "I'll get you some as soon as you're able to get out of here," Crow told her with a grin. "Am I going to be safe now?" Abby looked at the two men. "Everyone on my team has been fully vetted, including Carter, and the FBI has agreed to be out of the loop until a full investigation is complete," Crow explained and took his seat again. "I'll take that as a yes," Abby said with a grimace. "Can I get something for the pain?" Carter buzzed the nurse. "Can I help you?" A nurse's voice boomed across the intercom. "Can she get something for the pain?" Carter called back. There was a pause as the nurse checked her chart. "Sure, I'll be there with something in a minute." "How long do I have to be in here?" "That's up to the doctors, and keep in mind you're going to have that wound cleaned 3 times a day." Carter looked at her with raised eyebrows. She sighed and shook her head. The nurse then walked in with a syringe. "You might want to ask her what you need quickly, because chances are this is going to knock her out." The nurse stepped over to her floor and inserted the needle, quickly injecting the solution. She then left her with the men. "Abby, why don't you rest? We'll get everything straight later." "Okay." Abby muttered and drifted off to sleep. Carter was able to clean up and excuse himself to go make a phone call. He went to the entrance and stepped outside. He dialed the number and waited. "Mom, Carter, where are you? I've been calling you for hours." His mom questioned, relieved to hear from him, but concerned at the same time. Carter then began to explain what had happened, where he was, who Izzy really was, and why she lied. Honey, I don't blame her. She was just trying to stay alive. But you, son, you did her wrong. Marie's accusations fell heavy on him. Carter then explained his side and why he did what he did. Mom, I really do love her. Marie thought for a moment. Son, if you tell her what you just told me, she just might forgive you. Carter and Marie talked a bit longer, but she knew he had to go. Abby was released from the hospital about a week later. She was whisked away to a runway and was soon on a plane with an unknown destination. The flight was long and arduous, but Abby was happy to stand on solid ground again. Can you tell me where we are now? Abby questioned Crow as everyone climbed out of the plane. Michigan, he told her with a smile. Abby nodded. At least I might see snow again. Some of Crow's men met them at the plane with cars. They had gone ahead a few days before to get everything ready. Marshal Jason Beggs, the paramedic, walked over to Abby. As soon as we get to the location, we have to clean it. Abby groaned and climbed in one of the SUVs with Carter and Crow. They made it to a large home that looked like an old Victorian-style house. Abby was showed to her room, and John quickly had her in the bathroom cleaning her injury. Man, this hurts like a bitch, Abby complained. How long do I have to keep doing this? As long as it takes, John told her as he scrubbed, which translates into about another month. Abby winced as he got to a tender spot. I can give you something for the pain after, if you want, he told her as he continued. I'll see if I can tolerate it first, Abby grimaced again. That medicine mostly makes me sleepy. Maybe before you go to bed tonight, he suggested as he finished up. That way you can sleep better in more ways than one. Maybe so. He completed the cleaning and bandaged it up and helped her immobilize her arm again. How long do I have to keep the sling on? About 2 more weeks, maybe a month. When you can take it off, Steve, we'll start your rehab, John explained. I'll clean up in here. Let me know if the pain gets too bad. Abby walked out into the hall and was met by Carter. Come on, we need to talk. That can't be good. Abby adjusted her sling to try to make it feel comfortable, but was unsuccessful. She followed him to a second-story deck on the backside of the large house. It overlooked the large expanse of the backyard and a lower deck. You're worrying me. Abby watched him. He appeared anxious as he sat on the edge of a small table. I have to tell you something. We have no control over it, and we just have to accept it. He stopped talking for a moment, trying to gather himself. I hadn't thought about this until someone mentioned it about a week ago. What is it? When Carter had to stop to maintain his composure, she started crying. You're going to have to cut all ties, he reminded her, looking for the understanding that he didn't see. Yeah, I know. She couldn't quite recognize what he was getting at. That includes us. Carter stopped and looked over at her, not able to hold back his emotions. She started to bawl. They have to have an exception sometimes. Carter shook his head and looked up at her. But you're a marshal. He shook his head again, stood up, and walked over to her. She started crying. This isn't fair. They held on to each other as they cried, both of them. Crow watched this all unfold from a third-story window. They decided to make the most of what time they had together, however they could. It was difficult, but not impossible. Abby secretly still hoped they would make an exception. She's right, he thought as he watched the couple. It isn't fair. They decided to make the most of what time they had together, however they could. It was difficult, but not impossible. Abby secretly still hoped they would make an exception.